Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another preview video for the Furious Wild DLC for Total War 3 Kingdoms. And in today's preview, we're going to take a look at the faction rank mechanic as well as the Nanman faction's court. Now we are here in the middle of a game, and this is a bit of a teaser for tomorrow's preview. Now tomorrow is the final preview day before the mass embargo opens up. And I had up to 200 minutes during this week to showcase the game for you guys. And so far we have spent a little under 115 minutes. So depending on how long this preview goes, we will have about an hour or so to showcase the rest of the game. There's a few limitations. I can't show anything relating to Shi Xie, but I can fight him, which is why I have him saved up right here as well. And I can't show anything after turn 75. So I have the game set to turn 65 for a Meng Huo campaign on Legendary. And tomorrow during the preview, we'll spend the full hour playing the last 10 turns till I hit my limit or till the time runs out. So whichever one comes first. Now the campaign so far has been great, and I'm not going to review it. But what we're gonna do is make a lot of corrections to the guides and previews that have been coming out this week, since I had to make those pretty much with limited information, since I haven't had this build for too long. I think it's been just under a week, and I have noticed a lot of things that need to be changed for those guide, namely for the character guide, the experience level. When you level up, you get 10 points for each, and a little teaser, you can recruit Han officers, which means if you're playing as the Han, I'm pretty sure you can recruit Nanman officers as well. And there are new armor assets, for example. There's a lot of things to show, a lot of cool things that have happened in this campaign. But for this preview, we're gonna stick to our court. So this is the Nanman Court system. And the structure is very similar to the Han version. They're just called something else. So on the bottom here, you have what's called Cave Lords. Cave Lords are basically the administrators for the Nanman faction. They provide very similar bonuses, exactly the same as the Han version. So they're better than the Bandit version, which actually gets a nerf when compared to the Han version. Here we get the same +1 army limit, +4 ranks of no desire for higher office. You won't pick up any desire for higher office until you're past rank 4. And you also get 15% income from all sources, which is wonderful, and 30% corruption in the administered commandery, as well as all the effects you might have from traits and your background, which is a big deal because the characters all have very interesting background and they all level up. So some backgrounds are very much focused on administrative duties, so you should focus those characters as your cave lords, so you can pick them out as you're picking out new characters. And there are tons of new characters that are randomly generated, as well as characters from the existing 19 tribes. As you can see, we have almost finished our collection here. We have Wutugu, Ahuinan, Tu'an, Yangfeng, all in our court, as well as many other who didn't make it on this page. And speaking of this page, we have Tribal Council. Now you gain Tribal Council by capturing other tribes, as in gaining their fealty. The main tribes, as in the playable ones, Meng Huo, Zhurong, Wutugu. Okay, not the playable ones, but the main tribes. I can show you guys real quick. We did talk about this in yesterday's preview. The 7 that's in the middle, 4 of them are playable, 3 are not. Yangfeng, Wutugu, and Duosi. These 3 are not playable, but they're considered a major tribe, and each of them will unlock additional tribal council position for you. So that's why we have a bunch here. And what they do here is actually quite interesting. So this is your key tool to keeping high level characters happy, because satisfaction is actually very hard to manage on higher difficulty for the Nanman faction, and the bonuses for Tribal Council is preset. For each person in your tribal council role, you get no desire for higher office until level 3, you get minus 2% corruption, and also 5% trade influence. And that's pretty much the bonus that you get for each one of these. So as you can see, you get quite a bit of corruption reduction just from your tribal council. Much more than most of the Han factions or bandit factions, which have probably the worst economy now that I have gotten a good look at the Nanman factions here, because you get pretty good corruption reduction. You also get the same amount of boost to income and corruption reduction with your cave lords, whereas the bandit version, which I believe are called, I forgot what the bandit administrators are called. Local leaders are the yellow turban versions. Bandits, I can't recall, but I remember the bonus is 10% and the corruption reduction, I think it's minus 20 and then plus 10% corruption in adjacent enemy commanderies, which doesn't do you any good, and the AI cheats on higher difficulty with costs, so it actually doesn't hurt the AI as much either. So unless you're playing a very unfriendly co-op game, it's really not going to be that useful. And moving on, we have Seer, Advisor, Faction Heir, and Leader. So these 4 positions are the positions that will give you your Prime Minister, Heir, and Faction Leader bonuses on the characters. So here I have Wu Hao picked for this position simply because he has minus 15% upkeep for Animal Unit as part of his Professional Tamer background. Now, Professional Tamer background is an upgraded version of his previous background, which I do not recall, but this is one of the generic roles, and he is specialized in reducing the cost of animal units. So I put him here to save us a little bit of money, as running a roster of this many characters is a bit tough on your economy. And he has some other bonuses and a penalty to corruption that's from his trait, which I'm just gonna swallow, consider we have so much faction-wide corruption reduction. The 15% from animals is simply a must-have, especially since I'm spamming elephants and tigers right now in this campaign, which you guys get to see tomorrow. And then in the faction heir role, it's the same thing. You get an extra bonus of 25% chance to evade capture post-battle, but that's about it. The other bonuses are simply what you have on the character in terms of their traits and background bonuses, and from stats in terms of satisfaction. So you kind of want high authority characters here, and he doesn't get any bonus. This group gives no desire for higher office at rank 10, which is max rank, so you never have desire for higher office. But aside from that, there are no additional bonuses. It's all from the character themselves. And that's the same for the Visor, which will only become unlocked once we become ruler of the South, which requires a faction rank. And that pretty much wraps up our court, and it's a good segue to talk about our faction rank mechanic and some of the victory conditions that we can talk about. So popping here, this is the Nanman faction rank. You start out in the year 190 as headman, and this is a 190 campaign. For 194, I believe you still might start out as a headman, but you could potentially jump ahead and start out as a chieftain. The game does that for some of the 194 factions if you start out with some vassals potentially, or some extra land. But at the beginning, you're basically given 1 army and 1 assignment slot, and it's quite easy to upgrade to chieftain. It doesn't take a lot of territory or prestige in this case. Now I do say territory because gaining fealty gives you prestige as well as some buildings. So those are the 2 options for you to build up your prestige to rank up. And when you get to chieftain, you get 1 army slot still, 1 assignment still. So these are not additional, these are the cumulative amount. You get 1 trade agreement, 25% character experience, and you're able to adjust faction-wide tax levels quite early here. And that's going to be pretty helpful. And I've been using it to generate a couple rebel spawns, since many of you have asked me what type of rebels are spawned in the Nanman Land. And you get to find out about that tomorrow, as I have timed it pretty well. And there is actually a rebel that has spawned on turn 65, and we'll get to fight that at the start of tomorrow's preview. And then once we rank up, we get Lord of the Valley, and this gives us 1 Cave Lord position, our first one. Army limit goes up to 2, assignment goes up to 2, and trade agreement goes up to 2. Now, speaking of trade agreement here, I find it a little bit difficult to maintain trade agreements because you simply really want to fight your other Nanman brothers early on. And if you want trade agreement with the Han factions, you're required to get a set reform before you can do that. And reforms, as I have learned from playing this test run, are quite difficult to unlock in terms of the tiers. And I can explain that more tomorrow when we have slightly more time. But basically, if you look at my screen right now, on the right, you can see that I have a trade agreement with Lady Wu from the Sun clan and Ma Teng. So both of these are Han trade agreement because I'm running out of factions in the Nanman camp. We're basically a few turns away from uniting the tribes, which is something I really want to show tomorrow as well. So we don't have the option to trade with anyone. Now, of course, you could leave a few as your vassal and maintain a trade with them if that is your desired outcome for the Nanman Land, since some of them are less lucrative than others for sure, but sometimes out of your control because you're not the only one trying to unite the tribes. So if you leave them there, someone else could come and go after them. You also get a pretty amazing boost to character experience, 75%, and that's quite large and something that's quite difficult to balance. Sure, my characters are extremely strong, and as they level up, their background titles change, I get more stats and bonuses, all great things, but there's absolutely no tool to maintain character satisfaction for the Nanman faction because you have no access to title, so you can't make them happy by giving them a title, and everything's really reliant on how high authority is for your leaders. That's the only source of satisfaction, and we've been lucky enough to grab a legalist fanatic as a follower item for Meng Huo, which gave us 6 points, and that's keeping us afloat. But everyone's leveling up a bit too fast for me to maintain the huge roster. Now obviously you don't have to keep a huge roster. I've been playing this one as confederate all the tribes and taking every character that's relevant, as well as their wives and a bunch of their kids. They're all in my faction. I have a huge faction of characters, and we get to go see them during the next preview, but this experience is definitely giving me a bit of headache, even though it's definitely helpful for battles. And moving on, we get King of the Nanman. And if you look at the year, it took me about 9 years, or about 45 turnish, to reach this state. And it wasn't very hard. This is relatively what Duke is in the base game for the Han factions. You get a total of 2 Cave Lords. You unlock the Seer position, so you get additional character for faction-wide bonuses. 3 armies, 3 assignments, 3 trade, which we have not been able to take advantage of because we don't have any trade partners. And as you confederate, your relationship with the Han faction deteriorates at a very rapid pace, and no one wants to trade with you. I probably paid Sun Ce about 3,000 upfront copper just to secure this trade deal to begin with. But once you get it, they don't tend to hate you enough to cancel them. But that's definitely something to consider. And you see the character experience boost went up to 100%. And here we also gained the diplomatic option to vassalize some other factions. Now of course, when you wipe out a faction, you always have the option to vassalize them by allowing them to keep their last bit of land. So you don't necessarily need this. This is just the option for you to use it diplomatically through the diplomacy screen by offering someone to vassalize them without attacking them and bringing them down to their last piece of land. And you'll also be able to gain the option for military alliances. And this doesn't have to be with only Nanman factions. If you get the right reform, you can use both options with the Han factions as well. And then the next rank that we're aspiring to, we're getting there. Maybe we'll get to see it in tomorrow's preview. We become ruler of the South, which unlocks our advisor position, similar to the prime minister role for the Han factions. Still 3 Cave Lord, or actually I think we got 1 more. Yep, 1 extra Cave Lord, 1 extra army, 1 extra assignment, 1 extra trade, plus 10 satisfaction. So finally, when we become ruler of the South, everyone will boost by 10 points, and we can get rid of that legendary difficulty modifier, and maybe things will be easier. But the 150% character experience is having me a bit scared, because I feel like every character I'm using right now is probably going to hit level 10 very soon. And I'm curious where the titles jump happen, because right now I know the title change when you hit rank 3 and 6, and I believe one more time at rank 8, but I'm not sure about that. because I haven't checked if Meng Huo's title changed because we hit King of Nanman or because he hit rank 8. I have to wait for another character to check, but maybe there's 3 changes to background titles, and all these character experience are giving you the ability to see those changes happen on all your characters, even the generic ones. So that's quite exciting. Just make sure you have plenty of good items, maybe fingers crossed get a couple concubines, and satisfaction won't be an issue at all. And moving on, we have the Greatest Ruler. This is the highest tier, requires a bunch of prestige. You get same 4 Cave Lords, actually I keep saying same, but you keep getting one more. You get 1 extra Cave Lord, you get 7 armies, 5 assignments, 5 trade, and plus 15 points satisfaction, 200% character experience. The Nanman characters, I believe, can become very powerful. Now, of course, you don't have the option for school building, so you could argue that the Han factions could technically create the same situation, but you know you're never really going to build the school building until perhaps they add a follower item as a spawn for it. That could be a very interesting idea they could approach in the future, but in this case, we're going to have some very nice high-level characters to play around with in the late game. And finally, we talk about this kingdom. So many of you are questioning, what are the victory conditions for the Nanman faction? What's the goal? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is I think it's very well designed and it makes a lot of sense. The bad news is some of you will feel that it's too restrictive. So there is a thing called Emperor Seat up here. In the mouth of the dragon on this tablet, there is a orb location that's for Emperor Seat. And notice there's only 1. Usually you have 3. You have 1 because the emperor that's you're becoming the emperor of the Nanman kingdom. You're not here to become emperor of all of China. That is not your goal. So your victory conditions going to reflect that. And we're going to show that real quick by looking at the faction breakdown. So at the very bottom here, victory conditions for Nanman factions. Between you and your allies, unite all the tribes and control all 21 Nanman Land counties, while controlling 50 counties overall. Maintain both of these conditions for 20 turns. And that's your victory condition. So potentially you can argue this is a very short victory condition. And this might disappoint some of you. But if you think about it in another way, when we got the Mandate of Heaven DLC, the Yellow Turban's victory conditions for the Zhang brothers are 50 counties plus the capital and hold the capital for a year, I believe. And immediately you win. So it's very similar to that. But when you win, you don't have to stop playing. We recently had our Zhangjiao Let's Play on the channel, and we painted the whole map. And the rest of the game was equally entertaining, even though we have finished the Mandate War requirement. So you can kind of think of this as that first step for a shorter campaign, where you just go after the 21 Nanman counties plus 29 more from nearby land. Because staying close does make sense, because there are a lot of terrain disadvantages when you move away from the jungle, and there are also a lot of bonuses when you're in Nanman Land. So you do get weaker as you move out, and your troops are not the best in the world. Sure, the elephant are amazing. Let me tell you guys, the elephants are just amazing. I basically conquered about half the tribes in the early game with Meng Huo and 2 elephants. That's how strong they are. The delegate bar doesn't tell you that, but if you play your elephants correctly, they just walk through a couple of units and get 300 kills. But they're also extremely expensive and highly restrictive in terms of how many you can recruit. So it is balanced. You can't really just spam all of them. And we'll talk about that once we play the game in tomorrow's preview. But for this one, I want to keep things short. I do want to say that the Nanman Land roughly goes about here. Just trying to shade it out for you guys. And we currently already have all the Nanman lands, but we don't have all the tribes united because Mulu has decided to run south. And we get to see this little piece of newly added land tomorrow. So that's also a nice touch. And there's a lot of campaign elements which I think they really added a lot of details that I like, from historical sources in Romance of the Three Kingdom that can potentially build into a later Southern Expedition campaign when they have a later chapter pack for the Nanman Rebellion during the year 225. We'll probably see that. It's going to work out quite well in my mind. And another thing here about the victory condition, in case those of you are concerned, I think this is a pretty fair approach. Like, when you are talking about the development direction of Three Kingdoms in general, I think there's a couple of different camps. Similar to when you talk about Total War games in general, there's the historical lovers, there is the Warhammer fantasy lovers, and there are the same situation with Three Kingdoms. You have romance players who enjoy the fact that it is featuring the heroes and the characters that everyone's super familiar with, for those who are knowledgeable about the lore and the history. And then for those who are here just to play another Total War game that's historically based, Record Mode kind of does that for you. And in the same sense of people who like the lore and like the history, it doesn't make sense for Meng Huo to have a goal of conquering 95 counties, becoming an emperor, and controlling China. That was not his motivation, nor should it be a motivation that's encouraged in a Three Kingdoms game. So adding cultural subcultural unit packs and expansions on the map, maybe adding nomadic tribes in the future or adding Korea, it spices things up, especially for fans who are more familiar with the Warhammer series, where every faction plays very differently. You have very narrow goals for those factions that make sense for the lore. Well, this is the case where it makes sense for the lore, right? Meng Huo wants to create his own united Nanman Kingdom down in the south. Maybe the traditional land of 21 county isn't big enough, but adding 29 more and holding them for 20 turns perhaps is enough to say that we have, culturally adapted those lands over, and we now have a united Nanman Kingdom, and that's my victory condition. So that's a fair compromise between historical Three Kingdoms fans who are eager to play mainly the Three Kingdoms because they want to relive their childhood stories with the book, similar to how you have Warhammer players who only play the Empire because they associate with them so well. So in the future, if they add nomadic tribes and Korea as potential factions, I hope they get a similar treatment where they have set goals for their own subculture that makes sense for them, rather than just say, I want this to play the same as all the Han factions, and we need to conquer a set amount of counties to get our victory condition and unite all of China. I don't think most players want to see that, and having these more individualized goals kind of makes sense, just like how the Yellow Turban was designed to be a pinpointed strike at the capital. You take down the capital, have a popular uprising, and change the government. So going after the capital and holding just 50 counties makes a lot more sense for them than saying having to defeat 3 potential emperors and going into the Three Kingdoms period, because they would prevent that by taking the capital. So that's just my 2 cents on the topic, and I don't want to waste any more time because whatever time we save here will be us playing this tomorrow. So I hope you guys come back for that. Really excited to show you guys sort of the mid-game of the campaign, at least up till when I'm allowed to show. I'm only allowed to show up to turn 75. And we'll be jumping back by taking care of a couple of rebels and by fighting Shi Xie, uniting the tribes, and seeing how the game progresses from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!